Elden Ring is a game that's so big and so complex that one might just get lost in its world forever. Nah, I'm just kidding. It's huge, alright, but I've personally beaten the game twice already and am working on my third playthrough. And I'm far from alone in this. In fact, I'm kind of a slowpoke. All of my friends who played through the game with me initially and most of the fanbase I see online are also done with at least one playthrough, with many people being on their like 6th or 9th. I'm not trying to say that Elden Ring's world is small or anything, far from it, but what I am saying is that now that everyone's done or nearly done with the game, we've started to wonder about what's next, which is just natural, all things considered. See, given From Software's previous tendency to release DLC for their other Soulsborne titles, as in literally every one of them except for Demon's Souls and Sekiro, it is inevitable, in my and lots of others' opinions, that DLC is what's next for Elden Ring. Or at least it's inevitable that we would expect DLC for such an amazing game. And technically speaking, they have already given us some mini DLC content starting back in March. Patch 1.03 started off by adding the brand new character Jar Bairn into the game and added new quest phases for a lot of already existing NPCs. And if new characters and content being added after a game's release isn't the definition of DLC, I don't know what is. With that in mind, I can't help but wonder where in the wide world of the lore-filled Lands Between would work best for future DLC expansions. And as someone who has delved the depths of Elden Ring's limitless hidden secrets and storylines and has even read through the entire game script multiple times, here are my top 5 picks for what would be the coolest and most impactful and most probable expansion areas or ideas for Elden Ring and future DLC. By the way, real quick before we get into it, if you like to geek out about games, whether it be their lore or what makes them so fun, and especially if this isn't the first time you're hearing my voice, I'm talking to you, the 90% out there, you should consider subscribing to the channel. You'll get notified of my new uploads, which chances are will be about games you love, and you can always unsubscribe if you change your mind. Either way, I look forward to seeing you around. Number 1, Mykola's Egg. This is probably the most obvious pick of the bunch, and for good reason. For those who are unfamiliar with the character of Mykola, he is the twin brother of Malenia, and is a demigod just like his sister and all of his step-siblings. In fact, he's the only demigod in the entire game that we don't get to kill, encounter. And like his sister, he's a rare Empyrean, and has suffered from afflictions since birth. Malenia was cursed to harbor the scarlet rot inside her body, and Mykola is cursed to have the body of a child forever. This may be because they're Empyreans and outer gods housed their essence in them, or it might be because they're inbred. It depends on who you ask. But despite his appearance, Mykola was apparently extremely intelligent, strangely very likable, and was somewhat of an inventor, before all went to hell with the shattering of the Elden Ring. Malenia even describes him as the most fearsome demigod of them all in regard to his wisdom and allure. Prior to being in this giant egg in Mohgwyn Palace underneath the Lands Between, Mykola was actually located way across the land to the far north, where he was nursing his own great tree called the Halig Tree with his own blood. You can actually see the exact spot where he was previously located, which notably features his image in the roots at the base of the Halig Tree where you fight his sister Malenia. He was kidnapped from his position here by his omen-laden half-brother named Mohg, while Malenia was off fighting their other half-brother, General Radahn, for other reasons. Mohg kidnapped Mykola because he wanted Mykola, an Empyrean, to be the vassal for the outer god that he was serving, called the Formless Mother. Now, this is where it gets even creepier than kidnapping your half-brother who looks like a child. Mohg wanted to be the consort of his half-brother, but Mykola kept refusing to do certain things with Mohg in his bedchamber, which I suppose is why Mohg decided to put Mykola in this egg cocoon thing to germinate or something. Now, obviously there are a lot of lore implications in pretty much everything I just said. In fact, there's enough there to make an entire other video or videos about. So I won't go into explaining all of that right now. But that is precisely why I and many others feel like it would be a very welcome choice should Elden Ring's DLC feature Mykola awakening from the egg he's currently in. Or maybe having the player enter the egg to be transported to the dimension of the Formless Mother or something like that. It would offer so much on the characters of both Mykola and Mohg, and potentially some other glimpses into other outer gods. Also, there's no real reason to assume he's dead in there, since Mohg still declares that his Mohgwyn dynasty is coming to be, implying the vassal Mykola isn't dead. Unless he is, and Mohg really just likes sloshing around in the blood of his dead siblings, which I guess I wouldn't put past him, all things considered. Next up would be the lands outside the Lands Between. Any Elden Ring player worth their salt knows that there are multiple different worlds or lands or areas that exist outside the Lands Between that are referenced in the game. You've got the Land of the Reeds, which is where the race of humans appropriately named the Reeds originated. originates from. It would be a great addition to not only the world building of Elden Ring in general, but also to some specific and very important characters, such as Queen Marika herself, who famously comes from the land of the Numen, outside the lands between. She's even said to have strong ties to the Black Knife Assassins, who, get this, also hail from the land of the Numen, and both parties are shrouded in what should be illegal amounts of mystery, because let's be honest, we still don't know what the hell is going on with them or how they're connected exactly, especially given that the assassins killed Marika's favorite son. Being able to experience an alternate campaign in one of these faraway lands, or even the land where the Tarnished were banished to following their exile from the lands between, would undoubtedly go a long way to understanding some of the most integral pieces of Elden Ring lore. Or it could make things worse. I suppose that's also possible. Number next, speaking of other lands, what about the lands underneath? Compared to the overworld of the lands between, we've only discovered a tiny amount of what could possibly be explorable areas under the ground. I mean, look at all this unused space. But not only would this physically be a very possible addition that I could see happening in DLC using space that's already set in the game, but it would also once again give more background on important lore, which is very valuable to people like me. There are so many questions that need answering about the Mimic tiers and the backstories of what happened to the people groups that used to live in the Eternal Cities. Not to mention the connections with the race of the Dragonkin, which were apparently also beings that were created to possibly achieve immortality. And of course there's also Godwyn, who was famously killed on the Night of the Black Knives, which I alluded to earlier, and then all of a sudden has appeared here, underneath the world, at the roots of the Great Tree, as a giant clam-faced fish man. Some answers would be nice, and more items and exploration down under would most likely do the trick. Number 4, that weird rock in the ocean. Now, okay, this one probably sounds kind of random and weird to some of you, but just hear me out. I'm a bit of a weird case, alright? I'm definitely not OCD in real life, but when it comes to exploring games and learning the lore of a new universe, I definitely am. I notice all the little things on game maps, especially the one in Elden Ring, because most of them eventually get explored, especially if something about them sticks out, like a hole in a mountain, or a body of water in the middle of land, or a castle on top of a hill. This rock in the middle of the sea sticks out to me because the water looks like it's receding around it. And you've got to admit, that's kind of strange. And yes, this could definitely be nothing more than just the artist behind making the map for the game getting a little bored and throwing some weird stuff in the ocean for fun. I mean, there are ships present in other places and it's not like they're explorable, but I can't help but feel like somehow it looks like a breach into under the surface of the water. Kind of like how we breached the surface of the land after defeating General Radahn. And I can't help but wonder about just how cool it would be to explore a cavern that was previously sealed under the water in Elden Ring, complete with aquatic enemies and new creative bosses, and of course, new treasures with new lore. I don't think there's ever been a level styled like this in previous FromSoft games, so it would definitely be a win in my book. Before we get to the final entry in my DLC prediction / wish list, here's a quick honorable mention. It would be nice to eventually be able to explore inside of the Coliseums that are present all throughout the game. I'm not sure how much more they would add to the game, but it was always so strange to me that they would even be in the game if their only purpose was to give an extremely slight understanding to like 2 item descriptions. I mean, seriously, other than that, they're largely forgettable. There's got to be something more planned for them. There's even already some lore associated with them. Apparently, fighting inside the Coliseums was heralded as some sort of holy rite of passage for warriors to die an honorable death and receive an Erd Tree burial as reward for dying honorably. This practice also apparently died out around the time that Radagon came to leadership as the second Elden Lord / Queen. Yeah, it's weird, I've already talked about it in other videos, but the point is it could possibly enable us to not only fight some new bosses in some really cool circumstances, but also possibly receive some new pieces of lore regarding everyone's favorite complicated king figure, Radagon. And it could also offer some insight into the warrior jars. But besides these things, there's not much more to be said about the Coliseums themselves, so let's move on. Last but most definitely not least would be the distant past. That's right, you heard me. The history of the lands between. Listen, if they could do it for Farum Azula, they could do it for sections of the rest of the world. The amount of potential for extra backstory here is unparalleled. In fact, I can't even go over it all. I probably don't even have to. Allowing us to experience the story of long ago would possibly explain more about Marika, or Radagon, or the first Elden Lord who was apparently a dragon before the age of the Erd Tree, or the Great Tree, also before the age of the Erd Tree. The list goes on, and on and on. Not to mention the possible explanation as to what came first, the Elden Ring or the Greater Will. Which one was the chicken and which one was the egg? I placed the Distant Past at the end of my list because it has the highest potential by far for important lore additions, and it's also pretty likely, given that they would only really have to redesign sections of the map that are already built and build upon characters that are already there. Make it happen, Miyazaki. But of course, this is all just my list based on what I believe is possible, mixed with what I believe would be most enjoyable with a little bit of geekiness dashed in there. But what do you guys think? Is there another area or maybe even another character that you'd like to see fleshed out in DLC? Let me know in the comments below. Also, thank you so much for watching. If you're still watching, please consider leaving a like below if you enjoyed this video and subscribe if you haven't already for many more geeky videos to come. Huge thanks as always to my bandit crew, of which I have a new name to announce. Please say hello to Tiny Elf who just joined up. You guys are all amazing and are what keeps me going. So again, thank you all so much. That's about all I've got for this one, so head on over to my socials to keep up to date. Besides that, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. This is Bandit, looking forward to seeing you next time, and signing out. Peace!